Keep your organization up to date with the latest news and trends in the evolving cybersecurity landscape with CyberWire Pro. Pro is available for special enterprise licensing so you and your team can accelerate and sustain your cybersecurity awareness and education. Leading organizations from intelligence agencies to Fortune 10 companies rely on the CyberWire to keep their staff and leaders informed. We've got great discounts for government, commercial teams, and academia too. To learn more, visit thecyberwire.com/pro and click on the Contact Us link in the Enterprise box. That's thecyberwire.com/pro and then click Contact Us in the Enterprise box. And now, a message from our sponsor, CyberReason. Cybersecurity defenders don't fear ransomware, they end it. With CyberReason, defenders detect and stop ransomware that even others miss, a promise backed by their $1 million breach warranty. At CyberReason, they don't fear ransomware, they end it. Learn more at cyberreason.com. The U.S. formally establishes its Industrial Control System Cybersecurity Initiative, shooting wars in cyberspace, developments in the ransomware criminal markets. This week's iOS update may have closed the vulnerability exploited by NSO Group's Pegasus intercept tool. The U.S., U.K., and Australia issue a joint advisory on the most exploited vulnerabilities. Abkhazia's crackdown on coinminers. Joe Carrigan looks at the Mespinoza ransomware gang. And meet Marcy Flores, the Robin Sage of Liverpool aerobics. From the CyberWire studios at Data Tribe, I'm Dave Bittner with your CyberWire summary for Wednesday, July 28, 2021. U.S. President Biden this morning issued a national security memorandum on improving cybersecurity for critical infrastructure control systems. Among other goals, the memorandum seeks to initiate development of baseline cybersecurity goals that are consistent across all critical infrastructure sectors, as well as a need for security controls for select critical infrastructure that is dependent on control systems. The memorandum formally establishes the President's Industrial Control System Cybersecurity Initiative, a voluntary collaborative effort between the federal government and the critical infrastructure community to facilitate the deployment of technology and systems that provide threat visibility, indicators, detections, and warnings. That initiative began informally with electrical grid and pipeline security efforts. Would the next big shooting war begin in cyberspace? President Biden said it might well happen just that way. In a speech delivered yesterday during his visit to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, he said, quote, "I think it's more than likely we're going to end up, if we end up in a war, a real shooting war with a major power, it's going to be as a consequence of a cyber breach of great consequence, and it's increasing exponentially, the capabilities," end quote. Video of President Biden's speech was provided by Reuters. It's not a surprising speculation. Cyber operations as the opening phase of a war are probably today roughly the equivalent of what calling up reserves and organizing the railroads for mobilization were 125 years ago. There have been some developments in the criminal-to-criminal ransomware markets. First, REvil may have reconstituted and rebranded itself as Black Matter, although it's difficult to be sure. Forcepoint has found chatter on the high-tier Russian-language illicit forums XSS and Exploit, which suggests Black Matter is REvil's successor. Black Matter registered itself on July 19th, and 2 days later they advertised for people willing to sell access to large corporations in Australia, Canada, the UK, and the US. Recorded Future says that Black Matter claims to have incorporated the best, in a criminal sense, of both REvil and DarkSide. REvil announced its occultation on July 13th, the same day XSS banned REvil's spokesman from the forum. Black Matter doesn't openly claim to be either REvil Redux or a ransomware operation, and so keeps narrowly within the forum terms and conditions. But the wink and nod indirectness in their chatter suggests a force point that that's indeed who the new group may be. Another ransomware gang that may be the successor of older notorious groups is Haran, whose emergence is described by S2W Lab. Haran's approach incorporates features of both Thanos and Avedon. So far, Haran has publicly claimed only one victim. Cyber intelligence firm Kela this morning released its study of a new Russian-language forum that may, researchers think, become a new home for ransomware-as-a-service operations. Called RAMP, the forum made its appearance this month. It, too, seems to represent an evolution from earlier markets. Kela says, quote, "The forum emerged at the domain that previously hosted the Babuk ransomware data leak site and later the payload.binary leak site," end quote. RAMP hasn't been a runaway screaming success, but it's attracted some interest. Registration is now closed, but will, RAMP says, reopen in mid-August. It may draw criminal operators looking to work around other forum bans on hawking ransomware. As Kela puts it, if the admins can leverage their competitive advantage of welcoming ransomware-as-a-service programs, chances to grow are fairly high. There's speculation from the Register, 9to5Mac, and others that this week's iOS fix addressed vulnerabilities exploited by NSO Group's Pegasus spyware. In any case, iPhone users would be well advised to apply the update. 0 days may draw a great deal of attention, but a lot of frequently exploited vulnerabilities could be closed by patching. This morning, a joint cybersecurity advisory was issued by the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the Australian Cybersecurity Centre, the United Kingdom's National Cybersecurity Centre, and the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation. You'll recognize them as the FBI. The allied services list the top 30 vulnerabilities and briefly outline the mitigations that can be applied to avoid exploitation. Good digital hygiene can go a long way. As the report says, cyber actors continue to exploit publicly known and often dated software vulnerabilities against broad target sets, including public and private sector organizations worldwide. However, entities worldwide can mitigate the vulnerabilities listed in this report by applying the available patches to their systems and implementing a centralized patch management system. Even disputed, partially recognized states struggle with illicit coin mining. Abkhazia, regarded as an independent republic by Russia, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Nauru, and Syria, but seen by everyone else as a fractious autonomous region of Georgia, is, as Motherboard reports, conducting almost daily raids to shut down coin mining operations. The raids began in March and have, according to some accounts, taken down almost 1,300 rigs. The miners' offense, fundamentally, is stealing power and stressing the electrical grid. And finally, Robin Sage, meet Marcy Flores. Iranian operators have for some time engaged in catfishing to socially engineer access to targets in the UK, Western Europe, and North America. Proofpoint today published a report on how the threat actor it tracks as TA456 spent years running a fictitious persona, Marcy Flores, in a campaign designed to install Lempo malware in the machines of a targeted aerospace contractor. Lempo, Proofpoint explains, was designed to establish persistence, perform reconnaissance, and exfiltrate sensitive information. The campaign is probably connected to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps through its own contractor, the Iranian company Mahak Rayan Afraz. TA456 is also known as tortoiseshell and imperial kitten. The approach worked as follows. Marcy Flores, Marcy to the would-be friends the catfish was wooing, would begin with apparently benign emails that included what Proofpoint calls a video to establish rapport and build rapport with the intended victim. Another video was described as benign but flirtatious and included a OneDrive link. A second OneDrive link from Marcy represented itself as a diet survey with slacker leet speak and sketchy idiomatic control, but a smiling wink emoji. A pro tip: this sort of stuff is not the kind of thing that's normal interchange during professional networking. We mention Robin Sage, and longtime listeners will recall that the fictitious Ms. Sage was a persona created in 2009 by white hats to test the gullibility of organizations in defense and aerospace, both on the government and the industry side. This mother of all catfish was represented as a 25-year-old analyst at the U.S. Navy's Net Warcom, an MIT graduate with 10 years' experience in the industry. The name Robin Sage was itself a wink. It's the name of a U.S. Special Operations exercise. Some people were put on their guard by the implausible resume, others by their inability to find her through the phone number in her profiles or an MIT alumni directory. And to their credit, neither the FBI nor the CIA were taken in, but others were. While the winsome but quite non-existent Miss Sage romped across the network for 2 brisk months, she received job offers from some big and sophisticated corporations and lots of dinner invitations. After the gaffe was blown, Robin Sage entered the Hall of Fame of people who don't exist, right beside Bertrand Russell's present King of France. Anywho, back to Marcy. Her profile identified her as an aerobics instructor at the Harbour Health Club in Liverpool. She's probably not the only one used by Iran. Catfish, that is, not Liverpudlian aerobics instructors. As Proofpoint concludes, TI 456's dedication to significant social engineering engagement, benign reconnaissance of targets prior to deploying malware, and their cross-platform kill chain established TA 456 to be one of the most resourceful Iranian-aligned threats tracked by Proofpoint. The Marcy Flores persona is likely not the only one in use by TA 456, making it important for those working within or tangentially to the defense industrial base to be vigilant when engaging with unknown individuals, regardless of whether it is via work or personal accounts. So, friends, watch out for the company you keep. And now, a word from our sponsor, ExtraHop, stopping advanced threats with network detection and response. Let's face it, cyber attackers have the advantage. ExtraHop is on a mission to help you take it back. Regain the upper hand with security that can't be undermined, outsmarted, or compromised. With complete visibility from ExtraHop, enterprises can detect malicious behavior, hunt advanced threats, and forensically investigate any incident with confidence. When you don't have to choose between protecting your business and moving it forward, that's security uncompromised. See how it works in the full product demo, free online at extrahop.com/cyber. That's extrahop.com/cyber. And we thank ExtraHop for sponsoring our show. Members of Congress have recently been proposing that the Department of Homeland Security should undertake a study on hacking back, the notion that private organizations could go on the offense in response to cyber intrusions. I recently spoke with Anup Ghosh, CEO of Fidelis Cybersecurity, on the Caveat podcast to get his take on hacking back.
Every serious study I have seen has concluded this is a bad idea, primarily because attribution of attacks is very hard. Also, oftentimes, attackers use public infrastructure. And so when you're hacking back, you're more likely hurting someone else other than whom you might intend. And finally, the consequences of escalation can go very badly for victims. So, from a policy perspective, this is a bad idea. And I think anyone who's studied it has reached the same conclusions.
What are the comparisons to, sort of real world crimes. If someone were to kidnap someone or someone were to, physically restrict access to a space or a business or something like that,
Sure.
there would be real world reactions there.
Yeah, I think we do have real world analogies here that hold up to some extent. So, for example, think about someone breaking into your house, robbing you, and then later you actually find out, or you think you find out who it is, right? Well, you might be tempted to go and try and get back your stuff and maybe cause some pain on that person. We know, first of all, this is illegal. Second, vigilantism typically doesn't end well, right? And so, for these reasons, we do have law, we do have a justice system and law enforcement. And the same holds true in the cyber domain. We might think we know who got at us, but chances are we really don't. And anything we attempt to do against the adversary outside of our own networks can end badly, just like it might in the real world.
Yeah, it strikes me too that, even though we have robust laws for defending your homestead, for example, the castle doctrine, you're not allowed to have booby traps all around your property. That sort of thing isn't allowed.
Well, I think you bring up a really interesting point, which is you are allowed to defend your property, right? In many states, what is it, stand my ground kind of laws, the castle doctrine, as you mentioned. And that's that actually does create a guide, I think, in the security profession that you are allowed to defend your network, right? And if you do encounter an adversary on your network, you are allowed to engage and counter that adversary. And actually, that's a discussion we should be having, in my mind, is not the hack back. It's the detect, respond, counter your adversary on your network. And you are allowed to do that by law. So, and there are different levels of detection and response you can take. Active defense is something that is getting more fluency now in security circles as a philosophy, as a doctrine, if you will.
Do you suppose there might be a communications gap here? Because as you and I have been talking about, I think there is that powerful emotional component, and I think sometimes people feel as though they're not being heard, that they're not seeing a direct and immediate response. And perhaps if there was a way for law enforcement to say, look, we hear you, we see what's going on, we're working on it, and trust us, that things are being done even though they might not seem, evident or immediate.
Yeah, and I don't think you'll really be able to build that trust until we see better results. So, for example, an individual's business or machine being held ransom is not going to get the attention of the FBI, right? Mm-hmm. But a critical infrastructure that, like Colonial Pipeline, that ends up causing gas lines throughout the East Coast in the summer, that's going to cause a lot of pain for politicians. For the president in particular. And we have seen some stronger words come out recently from the Biden administration that it will hold Russia accountable. And I think that is the right strategy going forward.
That's Anup Ghosh from Fidelis Cybersecurity. There's a longer version of our conversation over on the Caveat podcast. Check it out. And now, a word from our sponsor, Ningio. Are you still measuring the success of your cybersecurity awareness training program by the number of people who take simulated fish bait? That was yesterday's thinking. Reactive metrics don't provide an accurate indication of a true cybersecurity aware culture. Instead, it's about proactive metrics that offer deep insight into how your employees are thinking about cybersecurity, what encourages them to report suspicious activity, and how often they are thwarting attacks. That's where Ninjio comes in. Through animated, micro-learning episodes featuring celebrity actors, Ninjio empowers individuals and organizations to obtain the proactive skills, habits, and behaviors to truly become defenders against cyber threats. Let Ninjio show you how to create proactive, cybersecurity-aware cultures from the inside out. New Ninjio episodes release every month. So head over to ninjio.com, that's Ninjio.com, to learn more and watch their latest episode for free. And we thank Ninjio for sponsoring our show. And joining me once again is Joe Carrigan. He's from the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute and also my co-host on the Hacking Humans podcast. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
Interesting article caught my eye. This is written by Danny Palmer over at ZDNet, and it is about the ransomware gang Mespinoza, who... You know, we over on Hacking Humans, you and I talk about ransomware a lot, and one of the things we followed is kind of the evolution of ransomware, the ratcheting up of ransomware. Real quick before we dig into this group, you want to just walk us through sort of the, where ransomware began and where we are right now with it?
Right. Ransomware began as a way of encrypting individuals' files, right? They would attack people. They would, home users, anybody they could get their hands on.
Right.
Then ransomware started being able to spread itself. And that gave the ransomware operators the opportunity to go after larger targets, right? So if I can go into an enterprise now and encrypt all of their computers, then I can demand a larger ransom. And rather than asking Dave Bittner to pay me $200 to decrypt his computer, I can ask Supercorp.
Right.
I can ask Supercorp for millions of dollars, and they might pay it.
Yeah.
So that's a higher rate of return. Eventually, corporations started saying, well, we're just not going to pay the ransom. We have backups. We'll restore from that. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's more ethical. And then the ransomware guys, not wanting to lose their revenue streams, started exfiltrating data. And that exfiltration of data then became essentially a data breach. And they would approach the people who these enterprises and say, not only have we encrypted your data, but we've also exfiltrated it and we have it here. And if you don't pay us, you can restore your own data. That's fine, but we're going to publish or sell this other data.
Right.
We're going to publish or sell what we stole.
Yeah.
And that's been pretty effective. Well, there's a new tactic from this Mespinoza group that is they go through the data that they've exfiltrated and they look for evidence of criminal activity, which they then use to ratchet up the demand for the ransom.
So let's say I'm an organization and I fear I've been having interactions with my law firm or my legal team or my in-house lawyers, and I'm saying, hey, I think we may have an exposure here. Maybe we didn't do things right. Maybe who knows what it is.
Right.
But it's a problem, and I don't want anybody to know about it, and there's potential legal problems here.
Right.
Mespinoza does what?
They use that as a factor in the double extortion. So I've said often that you should not let the fact that these guys have exfiltrated your data influence the calculus on whether or not you pay the ransom. That's been my advice and my stance.
Okay.
And my reasoning for that is you're dealing with criminals. You really don't have any reason to trust them.
Right.
There's actually evidence to the contrary that they're going to keep the data in confidential. They're going to publish or sell it anyway, or they're going to come back and demand more money.
Right.
All that stuff happens. And you've still suffered a data breach. That has still happened. By paying them off and getting them to agree to silence, you have not eradicated a data breach. That has still occurred. But now, if they go through the data and they see the evidence of some illegal activity, now they're going to say, oh, and by the way, not only are we going to disclose this data, but we might also notify law enforcement about this piece of information, whatever it is you found. It's the same tactic, but it's a new angle on that tactic that would make a vulnerable organization much more likely to pay up.
Much more embarrassing and, potentially legal implications as well.
Right. Yeah. Not only now are you dealing with the legal problems of a data breach, but now you're dealing with legal problems of past activity that may or may not have been illegal. And in fact, the information or the activity may not be illegal. It may just be something that you were like, okay, we have to mitigate this, right? Or it may be something you've already taken care of and there's no more concern about it. But you do not want that information becoming public, and you certainly don't want law enforcement knowing about it.
Yeah.
Right? That's just more motivation.
What about ways to take the sting out of data exfiltration? In other words, we hear about folks talking about encrypting all of your data at rest. So is that effective? Is that practical? What do you think? It's
effective and practical. You just got to make sure that you don't give these guys the access at some point in time because they're still going to go after that. If somebody exfiltrates a bunch of encrypted data, you can tell them, well, go pound sand. That data's encrypted. Good luck finding the keys for it.
Right.
But if they're smart enough and they're good enough, and this group is, I think Unit 42 calls them highly disciplined.
Yeah.
Right. They know what they're doing. They're pretty good, and nobody knows where they're operating out of. Mm-hmm. So that's impressive that nobody knows where they're operating out of, and they've been doing this for over a year. Mm-hmm. So if they do exfiltrate encrypted data, that kind of mitigates that problem, and then you technically have not suffered a data breach. Mm-hmm. But these guys what they're doing is fairly standard. They're getting in to enterprise computer systems via remote desktop protocol, or RDP.
Yeah.
And the article says they don't know if they're using brute force or if they're phishing for credentials. My money is on phishing. I'll bet they're phishing for credentials because that's fairly easy and inexpensive to do. It's not a lot of overhead.
Yeah.
And it produces pretty good results.
Yeah. Pretty effective.
Right. So once they get in, they also install backdoors of their own making, which is devastating and very hard to get rid of. I mean, you're going to have to go through and do all kinds of scanning of your network and every single endpoint on that network to find everything that they've put in there.
Right.
And these guys are very good at maintaining their presence. So best thing to do to mitigate this is before you suffer the data breach, before you suffer the credential leaking, is to implement multi-factor authentication on your remote desktop protocol.
Yep. Yeah. And if you're worried about crimes you may have committed, encrypt your conversations about that.
Exactly.
But I guess maybe we could back up and say, don't do crimes.
Yeah, you could do that.
Don't do crimes. All right. Well, Joe Carrigan, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Dave.
Thanks to all of our sponsors for making the CyberWire possible. Could your company benefit by reaching our large and influential audience? Send us a note at thecyberwire.com/sponsor. And that's the CyberWire. For links to all of today's stories, check out our daily briefing at thecyberwire.com. The CyberWire podcast is proudly produced in Maryland out of the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our amazing CyberWire team is Trey Hester, Elliot Peltzman, Puru Prakash, Justin Savy, Tim Nodar, Joe Carrigan, Carol Terrio, Ben Yellen, Nick Vilecki, Gina Johnson, Bennett Moe, Chris Russell, John Petrick, Jennifer Iben, Rick Howard, Peter Kilpie, and I'm Dave Bittner. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here tomorrow. It's time to take a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Tanium. Today, no industry is exempt from the growing threat of ransomware. Ransom attacks against critical infrastructure, private companies, and municipalities are alarmingly more frequent and pervasive in 2021. IT and security leaders must act. Understanding network assets and their status is the first step to reducing an organization's attack surface, improving cyber resilience, and accelerating incident response. Check your environment today with Tanium's free cyber hygiene assessment. Visit tanium.com/cyber-hygiene-assessment. And we thank Tanium for sponsoring our show.